Thanks for joining me for another Airbrush Asylum video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create some fine lines using the Wider Eclipse. This runs a 0.35mm needle nozzle setup. Let's get into it right now. So one of the first things that I like to do is to remove the front air cap. So with the wider airbrushes, you don't need another special air cap to allow you to spray without that air cap and the needle exposed. So you can just remove that, and that's going to help us to firstly see the point of the needle as well as get some finer detail. Plus it also allows easier tip drying cleanup. So the one thing that I will say is that when you do remove your air cap, be very, very careful not to drop your airbrush, because that needle is now exposed and it's going to do some serious damage if you drop it. So always put it back in a holder when you've finished with your airbrushing. And I prefer to sit it in this particular part of the holder, because if you trip on the cord, it's not going to pull out. Whereas if you have it sitting in here, yes, that'll hold it into place. But if you happen to trip on the cord, it can still pull out of that holder and land on the ground and damage your needle and nozzle. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some paint in my cup. I'm going to be using Trident water-based paint, and in this squirty bottle I've got some reducer, and I'm just going to add some of that to the color cup before adding in my paint. And now just going to add some black to that. I like to run my paint a bit thinner. I always run reducer. You can use this straight out of the bottle as well. So whatever brand of paint you are using, just go ahead and mix it up to your liking. The pressure that I'm running is about 30 to 35 psi. This is just my setting for general airbrushing, and I'm just going to put my finger over the front and pull back on the trigger, and that is going to bubble the paint in the cup, therefore mixing it with the reducer. Put my lid on. Okay, so before I go ahead and demo how to do some lines, I want to show you how to hold the airbrush. Now, whether you're left or right-handed, you can follow this method. I like to use both hands when doing my lines to keep myself steady. Your finger, I tend to run it a little bit over the trigger, so that way you don't need to have too much throw in your action. You can even sit it right over if that's comfortable for you, and then just pull back a little bit. Whatever you feel is comfortable and what works for you is always the best method, and you can see it from the other side as well. I tend to change my position as I'm sort of going on, and obviously how much my finger is fatiguing, so just get yourself into a comfy position and just go with that. You also notice that what I like to do is run my air lead around my wrist, so this just helps with any drag, and for me it's a lot more comfortable. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the exercise and do some lines. Okay, so I generally recommend to my students that before they start attempting to do the real fine lines, just try and do a shaded line. So from a distance, probably about 10 centimeters away. So keep the air pressed down and only pull back for paint. You don't want to go like this, all right, because that's going to build up unnecessary paint in the front, causing more and more tip drying. So you need to keep that air pressed down at all times, and then paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. So again, air on, paint off. And I'm moving with the stroke. So what I don't want you to do is to sit there, wait, and then move, and then stop, because you're going to get these heavier sections. And if you're trying to do a finer line, that's going to carry through as well. So you need to have your air pressed down at all times, and then you can also steady yourself with your hand, right? So that way you don't adjust your height. So to give you an example of that, if I'm airbrushing without my hand, I'll do this deliberately, and I start to move in and out. You're going to get a real funky looking line. That's not what we want. You can see I was further away here, so that way that got softer. So we want a continual straight line right the way through, without any heavy spots and without any variation through the stroke. So go ahead again, use your hand, you can lay it flat, get yourself comfortable, and then I tend to move in off the side. So air on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. And that way you can keep it relatively straight. They're not 100% perfect, but they're good enough for the purpose of the demonstration. Another little quick tip, when I am doing my line, I'm looking ahead. Let's pretend this is the airbrush and this is where my eye is. This is what happens when I'm actually doing the stroke. So the airbrush is moving and so is my eye, right? And what that does is it allows you to keep a straighter line. If you're looking at the airbrush, right, and then moving, say slowly, you want to keep your speed relatively consistent. But let's say, for instance, I'm looking here, right? I'm not looking ahead now, and I'm moving really slow, all right? You can see how much easier that is to get a bumpy line. Because what I'm doing is I'm focusing on the airbrush. I'm not focusing where I'm actually traveling. So it's very important to look ahead of your line, and also the faster you go, the easier it is to keep that line straighter, okay? So I'll give you another demonstration. You'll find your own correct speed according to what paint mix you've got, what airbrush you're using, and what's comfortable for you. But if I go faster now, and I'm looking ahead of that line, you can see it's a lot easier to get those strokes in. Okay, so just a quick close-up of the lines on the canvas that I just demoed, so you can get a better look. I'm going to show you another exercise now, which is really going to test your double action technique. So let's get into that right now. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is really going to push your double action technique and teach you a method that you can utilize and practice over time to perfect it. So what I want you to do first is, with your airbrush, draw 4 vertical lines. They don't have to be the best lines, just like so, creating 2 columns, okay? And then you're going to keep the air pressed on, and I want you to move through and put a line in each one of those columns. But I want you to keep your speed and your distance the same, so don't vary it. So don't try and cheat and go, oh, this is so easy, I'll just come in and do these perfect lines. I'd actually rather you miss one like so and keep going. Don't stop, and keep that speed consistent and move off the side of wherever it is you're doing this exercise. So if you're doing it on, say, an A4 bit of paper, then you know, come out, say, 10 centimeters on either side, and then that will make it a little bit more difficult. And just keep practicing this particular exercise, because when you do master this, it is going to make you get that double action right. And then you're going to avoid things like these, you know, the dots that I was talking about, and then when you move and you get those horrible ends on the end of your line. So this is all about, you know, air on, paint off, paint on, paint off. And I don't even mind if the line isn't perfect. It's really just about getting that accuracy. All right, so you can see paint on, paint off, 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 and so on, okay? So I want you to practice this, you know, just get yourself a whole heap of these drawn up, the columns, and make the columns obviously with the airbrush rather than printing them. That gives you a bit of extra control, all right? So just a quick look at the results from the column exercise. As you can see, not super critical to get those perfect lines, but if you can get nice lines, then fantastic. It is going to take some practice. Don't get disheartened. This is a difficult exercise, but I can guarantee you if you practice it over time, you're going to master that double action technique. And if you want to continue your learning, check out some of the other videos and playlists that I've got listed here. And until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.